Are you a sensitive person? My goodness, what does it mean to be a sensitive person? Well, when I think of the saints and masters who could feel the thoughts of many people, see remotely, Padre Pio, the great saint of Italy in the 20th century, he could meet somebody and knew all about them and what was right for them to do and what their issues were. That's sensitivity. But that level of saintly sensitivity is, of course, one that can withstand the impression and the impact emotionally and complexity-wise of this sensitivity. More practical and more likely is the person who says, I'm a sensitive person, and therefore I'm easily thrown off my center by all sorts of things, physical inputs, for example. Autism, and some of the signs of autism are more extreme in that way, sound and light and noise and things like that. But sensitivity, in other words, encompasses a wide range of things. Sensitivity to the physical senses. Oh, I'm cold, or I'm hot, or this kind of sensitivity. But more likely the case, and more of an interest to me in sharing these thoughts, is the sensitivity to the feelings and thoughts, and especially the opinions, and particularly the critique, real or imagined, of other people. You know, our sensitivity to critique, again, real or imagined, felt, is a good yardstick for those of us on the spiritual path working towards ego transcendence. It's a good measure of how we're coming along in that way. Being a member of Ananda Worldwide, and our founder, Swami Kriyananda, went through many years of intense critique and so forth by other people. And to watch how he handled this under fire, even in a trial, a legal trial, was really most amazing. How he kept not only his center, but his kindness, and beyond that, the explosion of creativity, which was characteristic of his entire life, whether in writing or poetry or playwriting or music or counseling and lecturing, all these different things. So let's talk about sensitivity to critique. Well, generally speaking, when we experience that, real or imagined, that we are self-defensive. Self-justification really is the death of the soul in many important respects. Swami Kriyananda's own book called Sadhu Beware is a very good volume of practical information for those on the spiritual path seeking ego transcendence towards the goal of ever new joy of the soul. And so we can use that critique to kind of measure ourselves to some degree. Okay, the first level is denial, right? That's wrong, that's hurtful, you're a bad person, you're criticizing me. That's sort of the outward level where the ego defends itself. Well, don't beat yourself up if you do that. It's so deeply ingrained in us to be self-protective. But then if you're mindful and you're seeking ego transcendence, when you get a calm moment, step back. And Yogananda and his guru Sri Yukteswar and our friend and counselor Swami Kriyananda all say, at some point, ask yourself, is there any truth in this critique, real or imagined, or perhaps felt? And that's when we can begin to get some percentage of value out of these things that happen to all of us. Anybody who never gets critique is probably more like a clam or a slug. But anybody who serves in the world around us, who aspires towards high ideals and so forth, will of course be critiqued, more so because of the ideals they profess. And then reality that, well, we're not there yet. doing the best we can, as Swami Kriyananda would say to us, and about himself also. And so, what truth is there? If in objective determination and analysis, etc., and intuitive awareness, you can genuinely say that the critique is unfounded and misses the mark, then you should be able, you want to work to be able, to dismiss it without hard feelings or resentment or a sense of dislike of the person and what amounts to a subconscious desire to get even if you would never say that to yourself. Get even by, for example, not looking at that person or ignoring them or coming up with perhaps your own critiques of their actions or words. Okay, so, but if there is a percentage of value in that, some truth in it, then the next level is to work on yourself, to see to what degree you can make changes. Now, there comes into being a social or outward response to this critique, real or imagined. Should you respond to it? How do you respond to it? Especially now when it comes to you in verbal or written form directly at you, then some of the advice that is given by these teachers I've mentioned is to say things like, perhaps you are right. You may be right. Meaning you have an even response of neither rejecting nor accepting necessarily the critique. Partly non-acceptance has to do with not encouraging a critical mind, another person, to be critical. Okay? That's part of it. Part of it is you might need time to reflect on it. And of course, as I say, being perhaps a critical person, there may be some other agenda in that critique. So separating the critique coming at you for what it might mean and have value to your own mindfulness and self-improvement on the one hand, and the intentions and motivations and perceptions on the other hand of the other person, it's good to make a separation. Okay. But nonetheless, when it comes to you in that form where you are expected to respond, you may be right. I'll have to think about it. And, anything in between. Generally speaking, particularly if somebody doesn't really have our highest interests in mind, and I'm assuming that's most people, unless it's your confessor or your spiritual teacher, you don't want to go down too deeply into that American rabbit hole of self-flagellation or self-deprecation. It's a charming habit, to be sure, of the American culture, which is to be bashfully humble or overtly humble or whatever that is. You don't want to give people reasons to use your shortcomings against you at some other moment. Confessing your sins to people who don't have the wisdom or your highest interests in mind is not a good idea. I go further than that based on the advice of Swami Kriyananda, which is even those your closest and dearest ones, you should be circumspect when you go out of your way to admit your faults, because those who are closest to you naturally represent the karma which is closest to you, and sometimes it's not healthy for them to have ammunition, you might say. So you do want to be circumspect that way. Sometimes saying your own fault in somebody else can hurt their opinion of you. And so one wants to be discerning in that respect. Now, there are times, like when Yogananda was representing the teachings and his guru and so forth in India generally, or same thing with Swami Kriyananda, or in a workplace environment, there are times when you may need to defend yourself in order to defend that which you represent. Okay? And that is more challenging. Staying calm and collected, choosing the right time and place when you can be calm and collected, are all ideals that are not so often possible. Sometimes it comes at you and you can't help but be a little bit of emotional, and so you're going to have to do your best in the day-to-day life of things, so that when a real big test comes, you can be more mindful and circumspect. Count to 10 before you slug back, as my mother would tell me about hitting my brother, who was bigger than me anyway. So let's just say, for the sake of this video, that your sensitivity to critique is a good measure of the degree by which you are moving towards ego transcendence. The ability to welcome tests and trials generally, and hurtful situation, pain and suffering, but here we're speaking of critique from others. Your ability to handle that amidst the crash of breaking emotions is a very good litmus test. Again, not to inflict upon yourself, well, woe is me, I'm a schmuck, but more to give you a calm measurement of how you're doing. So before you parade yourself around as being a sensitive person, consider the fact that sometimes what that means is I'm very self-involved. I'm very ego-protective. So even though that phrase is bantered around as if I'm proud of my sensitivity, be careful of being proud of your sensitivity. All right, no easy way out. The only way out is in.